To follow up, especially coming from the LRT side. First of all, my presentation is going to be super simple. Part of the reason is Yao-Chi kept me up till 2 o'clock in the morning last night talking about all this stuff, but there's a bunch of rabbit holes that we could actually go down, and usually when we talk about Renzo and we present Renzo to investors or users, I try to really start high level and try to explain how we think about stuff. Because right now, when you look at the LRT space, everybody kind of looks the same. And it's going to take a little bit more time. Everything's moved extremely fast in the space. But it's going to take a little bit more time to play out to actually understand the strengths and weaknesses of how protocols are designing or the decisions they're making. So presentation is going to be simple. We could have conversations in between, completely open to that. And just thank you for the 7X team. We were in Turkey back in November and attended. I believe that was the first session they did. So it's pretty cool to just be here in front of everybody and that people actually care what we're building about. So quick background on the contributing founders. First of all, there's only 3 people here. The team's at 11 people. We have a couple team members here. I always take a couple minutes just to thank the team because there's so much that goes into it. And the team is growing, but we have Sam and Cam here from the Renzo team as well. We have more guys coming in tomorrow. But the 3 founding contributors is myself, Karthik, and James. And essentially, when you look at our backgrounds, the piece I want to point out here, also when you guys direct certain questions to me, I'm not an engineer. So if you're going to start asking me very deep questions on the engineering side, I'm going to push back. But essentially what you have with the founding team and why the 3 of us came together is you have somebody that has deep security and engineering background in the space, has been in the space since 2016. That's James. You have Karthik, who's one of the smartest researchers that I know in the space that actually uses products and protocols. And a lot of the product and decisions and the research that we've done at Renzo actually comes from Karthik. And then I'm an operator in the sense that I pull a bunch of pieces together. I manage the relationships with investors and partners, but we all use the product. So there isn't one person at Renzo that's calling the shots. Even as the team's growing, it's extremely collaborative and we challenge each other, and that's how we grow. So at the very end, when Mike made a comment about Lido, he was actually referencing this slide that I prepared. And this is, to me, one of the most important slides when I first have conversations with somebody that's trying to understand restaking. Because even though restaking sounds very similar to staking, it's completely different. So in the early days when we started building Renzo last summer, it's only been 9 months, but everybody thought that Renzo was a Lido fork. And it took us conversations over and over to explain how different the ecosystem is. And the way I've kind of organized things in my head is really understanding the big silos when you look at a staking protocol like Lido versus what Renzo is doing and what's going on in the restaking space. And once you understand this, you really start thinking about decisions that you have to make differently around how to build a protocol that's going to be able to scale with the complexity of EigenLayer. Okay, so essentially here there's 4 pieces. There's the deposits, what kind of assets you deposit at the beginning of the flow, how you manage your node operators. Mike talked about there's actually 2 sets of node operators. There's operators that do like vanilla staking that we call, and then the restaking operators. Strategy and rewards. the strategy and the reward piece is one of the most important things. And it's really difficult when you start at the end of the flow, but there's more people coming in, so we'll pause for a second. Okay, we'll leave them out. So when we first started building Renzo and trying to figure out all the decisions that we had to make in order to see the product that you see today, we actually started at the very end of the flow. And again, Mike actually talked about this quite a bit. On the reward side, whereas with staking, right, when you go through the flow, you deposit ETH. There's many nodes. Most liquid staking protocols have a decentralized node set. There's one strategy that you run. You either secure Ethereum consensus or you don't, right? It's almost like a passive strategy. And then there's one reward token. It's ETH, right? So you might have MEV and consensus, but it's still paid out in ETH. When you look at restaking and you work from the very end of the flow back to the beginning, there's many rewards that are going to get paid out. So Mike had talked about earlier about AVSs. AVSs have clients that use them, and those clients could be, there's a large variety of them. And they're going to pay rewards to the stakers for the services that they use in many tokens. These two pieces here are, again, they're the two most important things, because a protocol that is only able to manage one token, let's say just ETH, will not be able to scale the same way that a liquid restaking protocol needs to scale. So for example, if you're only able to use ETH as collateral and pass that ETH back and forth, on both sides of the funnel with AVSs, you have to swap those rewards for ETH. We'll talk about alignment on incentives in a bit. On the strategy side, it's not just one strategy that you run. You have multiple AVSs. So we wrote a piece at the beginning, or Kratik wrote a piece at the beginning of December that talks about portfolio construction and how this piece here is really important. If you have 3 AVSs, you could run 7 strategies. Secure A, secure B, secure C, AB, BC, ABC. At 15 AVSs, there's over 30,000 combinations of strategies that you could actually run. But, come on in, guys. See some OGs. Polkadot. The reason that's really important is because we're all used to thinking about liquid restaking, we just think, oh, you get in and you get out, and it's pretty simple. But when you have a lot of AVSs and you have different strategies that you could choose, you need to have a way to actually decide which AVSs you want to secure, what kind of weights you want to apply to them. You don't have to go 100% into an AVS. But the other piece that's really interesting is you might want to migrate liquidity from one to another. So at the very beginning, we don't know how many AVSs are going to launch, but let's say 3 launch, and you secure all 3. And what if the yield profile or the demand isn't there and you want to switch? You could actually migrate that liquidity. So that migration of the liquidity, we know there's cooldowns. The point that I'm trying to make is it's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made. So a liquid staking protocol and the design decisions that they need to make, because they have one, they've been able to decentralize their node operators, and it's actually been very important in the decentralization and the security of liquid staking. On the restaking side, we have a thesis internally that having many nodes is actually extremely inefficient, And it introduces a lot of risk because you have all these coordinations that you have to do. And the coordination is because there's multiple AVSs. You want to migrate liquidity from one to another. There's a lot of rewards. How do you manage those rewards and you collateralize them? So you need a protocol that actually looks very differently. Cool. All right, so taking that into consideration, some of the earliest decisions that we had to make as a team around designing an LRT protocol really comes down to these 5 things that we have listed here. What does the token look like, the actual LRT? What kind of token is it? What is the composite of the collateral that's used within the protocol? Strategy, how are we going to secure AVSs and manage that? And how are our node operators going to look? And there's a lot of different variations here. What I am trying to show here is how we thought about Renzo and the trade-offs that we had to make. Obviously, we have a bias. We think Renzo is the best and it's going to be able to scale the best. But there's a lot of trade-offs. So on the first one, on the token piece, who here uses Renzo? Okay. Who here uses LRTs? Okay. Well, outside of Renzo, like other tokens. Okay. So what we're seeing in the space right now is different decisions being made on how many LRT tokens you could have. And the reason that's really important is there's kind of 2 decisions that are dependent on each other when you make that decision. You have to trade off on whether you're willing to fragment liquidity. I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. And you have to figure out how you're going to manage that portfolio construction of the AVSs. And there's a couple theories out there. The first one is, well, I'm going to create an LRT that has high, medium, and a low risk profile. And the reason you have to do it on the very front of the flow is because all the liquidity that goes through the protocol secures a basket of risk, and you get return through that, and you want to be able to pass it back to the same users that are opting into that strategy. We don't think that works. Liquidity fragmentation and the surface area of LRTs is so huge that when you think about having more than one token and being able to build out the DEX liquidity that's needed, so all the DeFi integrations, the DEX liquidity, the lending protocols, oracles, not only is it really hard to build deep liquidity, but it's also extremely expensive. Like these partnerships that we're having assigned to secure oracles, incentivize yield in some places to be able to come is extremely hard. And this one decision that we made on having one LRT, but actually having a lot of variability in the rest of the protocol is one of the big technical moats that we think we have at Renzo. Because if you don't make these decisions up front, you can't just shift and decide to change them. So Renzo has one token. It's ezETH. We noticed over the summer that everybody was using different permutations of RR. To be honest, I don't even know all the other protocols and what their restaking tokens are because they're all some kind of variation of RR or RST. It's hard to say, and we were literally just sitting around and said, we have to make it easy, and we're like, all right, there it is. We're gonna call it ezETH. But Renzo has one LRT token. Not that special. A lot of protocols have just one token. Versus having multiple tokens, you see like EigenPi, they do a one-to-one on the deposit assets. That extremely fragments liquidity, and it's going to be really hard for them to build out the DeFi ecosystem that's needed. The second decision you need to make is how are we going to manage how are we going to manage the rewards and the yield that is being captured for our users? And there's really two decisions. There's two models out there. There's a rebasing token and a reward-bearing token. All that means is that a reward-bearing token, we don't have to distribute the yield. There isn't a lot of operational things that we need to do, because the yield that is captured and the deposits that come in are used as collateral and are reflected in the price of ezETH. And the reason we decided to do that is, again, if you go to the previous slide, there's a lot of rewards. And those rewards, to be able to distribute them to users, just from an efficiency standpoint, would not be very efficient. So we collateralize and use everything as collateral within the protocol. The next decision we had to make was, well, what kind of assets do we want on the supply side? When we say supply, is from a deposit perspective. And right now, what you see when you look at the top 5 LRT protocols is you see either native ETH, now it's starting to change a little bit, or LSTs. There was 2 market segments. So for example, EtherFi was the first only native restaking protocol, meaning that they only took native ETH in. And then you saw other ones like Stater and Swell and those 2, where they only took LSTs. And the reason those decisions were made, it's based on their existing tech stack, right? So Renzo, we did not have a previous product or a team or anything else. We built everything from the ground up. And we realized over the summer that incentive alignment is going to be actually really important here. And the way we think about incentive alignment is both on the deposit assets and how our relationships with AVS is. We're starting to see that play out in a huge way. So Renzo is the first protocol on mainnet that allows you to deposit native ETH and LST tokens. Right now we have ezETH and BETH, and it's used as collateral within the protocol. So we do not swap the LST for ETH. We don't have a receipt token for the LST, even though we capture the yield within the protocol. And we represent it with 1 token. So what that's started translating to is relationships that we're building. So on the deposit side, we're able to work with BNB Chain and launch native restaking on BNB Chain, which is going live this week. And the reason they want to work with us is, okay, other protocols take in native ETH and they give a receipt token, but BNB Chain also has BETH, and it's their LST token of the ecosystem. If you're not able to take that deposit asset and use it as collateral, and you're swapping it for another token, incentives aren't aligned and you're clashing. Other protocols that are able to take LST tokens have their own LST, so they're competing for that same liquidity with those ecosystems. So there's friction there. It's not always head-to-head, but there is quite a bit of friction, because BNB, for example, wants to see the utility of BETH grow and the fungibility of it grow, not having somebody vampire attack them and swap it for ETH. Same thing with Lido. We were extremely surprised that everybody started vampire and attacked Lido. We're going to take ezETH, we're going to dump it for ETH, or we're going to dump it for our own LST token. We've been building a relationship with Lido where we have incentives aligned, because we're able to take ezETH in and use it as a collateral. We're actually increasing the fungibility of ezETH in a use case. At the same time, what you're going to see play out in the next year with Lido is they're building something called community staking modules. And what that's going to allow is protocols like Renzo to take native ETH that's coming in through the protocol, actually stake it with Lido, get ezETH, and wrap it back through the protocol. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, some AVSs might prefer ezETH over native ETH. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the point that I'm trying to make is that incentive alignment has put us in a position where we're launching Arbitrum and BNB this week, and literally every single rollup that you could think of is knocking on our door, asking us to integrate because they know we don't compete, okay? Now, LSTs are ERC20 tokens. So the fact that we're able to use ERC20 tokens as collateral within the protocol on the deposit side, on the reward side is also very advantageous because, I'm gonna take a second here. So on the AVS side, you're gonna see it's an open marketplace with AVSs. And what you're gonna see is AVSs, some are gonna pay rewards in ETH, some are gonna pay rewards in ERC20 tokens, their own Gov tokens. Others are gonna pay yield in points. We're gonna see points aren't going away. They're just gonna move down the ladder. But the important thing there is if you're a protocol that could only use ETH as collateral, so the same thing that we talked about on the deposit side, that means that when you're getting reward tokens that are ERC20 tokens, the only way you could pass that yield back to the people that deposit is by selling it for ETH. Now, who likes to get auto-farmed? I don't think anybody does, right? So again, incentives aren't aligned there. Oh, did we unplug or? I think I'm just locked. Okay. So that's talking about deposit and collateral. And then on the strategy side, again, you could make decisions around which AVS is secure. How do you make those decisions? How do you quantify the risk reward? And the relationship with the node operators there is really important because when you're an AVS, you want security. You want to know that you have a high level of security. You don't want slashing to happen. So one of the big decisions that we also made at Renzo was we're not going to run our own nodes. We don't want a really large group of decentralized node operators. We decided to go down a similar route that Lido went down in the early days when liquid staking was just coming to fruition. And we're using institutional grade node operators. So the coordination effort there, not only do we have an extremely high level of security that we're providing AVSs, we have less coordination that we have to figure out as far as securing the AVSs. And then we're also able to harvest that yield that's coming from the AVSs in a very efficient way. So these are some of the decisions you have to make. And believe it or not, like we could talk through and look at some of the LRTs. If you think about these questions and you go look at their protocols, everybody's made a little bit of a different design decision here. So almost all the LRT or the top 5 LRT protocols, they all have extremely decentralized node operators. They have thousands. On the strategy side, they're still trying to figure it out. We've actually come forward and proposed, if you look at the Mirror article that we posted at the beginning of December, we talk about introducing something called max loss. So being able to apply different attributes to all AVSs equally so we know what the risk reward is. It's not just slashing, there's operational cost that is involved on the operator side. So just because you see a higher yield, that doesn't just mean, oh, the slashing risk is higher. It's like nodes actually have to run extremely or different requirements and it costs more money. So there's economies of scale there. On the deposit and collateral side, like we talked about, some have just done native ETH, some just have done LSTs. Now we're seeing LSTs add native ETH in their flow. Both Swell and Stater did that in the past month. And on the token side, almost everybody has decided to do a reward-bearing token. But if you had an existing protocol and you had a different design decision, you can't just switch that. And then on the token side, for the most part, we're seeing one token. But like I mentioned, if you're a legacy LST protocol that's pivoting into LRTs, you have an LST token, now you have an LRT token, you might have a reward and a rebasing token. These are all inefficiencies and incentives that you have to manage in the DeFi space. The last slide here, I kind of talked about this a little bit, but it helps you from a visual perspective. What Renzo is trying to do is have as flexible of a funnel on the supply side and on the demand side. We want to partner with every single L1 and L2. We don't want to have friction and we don't want incentives not to be aligned. So we're launching Arbitrum, BNB, Mode, Base. These are all partnerships that we have. And the nice thing is, because we have this model where whether you deposit ETH or an LST, you always get back ezETH. It's the same thing on the rollup. So when you see us launch on BNB chain, at first we'll be able to accept native ETH. In the coming weeks when the caps open for EigenLayer, we'll be able to take BETH as well. The user's not going to care. They're always going to get back ezETH. They're not going to get two tokens. So it allows us to build that DeFi ecosystem, whether it's PancakeSwap or Radium. Who else are we talking to over there? Everybody?
Everybody.
Yeah, Pendle, right? We're able to do it and do it at a really high level because there's just one token and we have to focus on that liquidity for that one token. So the design decision to actually have deposit assets, which I've listed here, and the rewards in the ERC20 allows us to actually align incentives on both sides. And like we talked about with AVSs, we had a couple meetings with AVSs today, and they just assume that every LRT protocol is just going to auto farm them. We're like, no, we are working with Gauntlet, fortunate enough to know Tarun for a few years, and we're taking a lot of best principles from lending protocols around like asset listing frameworks. What kind of requirements do you need to define what assets could be safely used as collateral? As you could imagine, AVSs are going to have rewards from tail-end assets. If you're using as collateral to mint ezETH, you could put ezETH at risk. So there's all these frameworks and best practices that we could take from lending protocols that could be applied to restaking as well. And essentially what the goal of Renzo is to align incentives on both sides in a permissionless way. We don't need LOIs. The protocol is live. Give us the incentives. We will go and secure it. Our community will go and secure it. And make ezETH literally the LRT layer that's compatible across rollups and wherever you go, because it's the most liquid asset, you just want to hold it. Now, I talked about efficiencies a little bit. The more hops that you have to go from the left side to the right side, everything we're talking about here is on ETH mainnet, which means gas. You're consuming gas, every single transaction computation. When you don't build a protocol from the ground up and you pivot into restaking, you have a lot of technical debt that you can't shed. And that technical debt turns into inefficiencies, which turns into gas, which means as a staker, it's eating away at your yield. So it's going to be interesting to see how protocols compensate for that. Some are probably going to emit their token as additional boosts to make up for that. Others, we'll see what happens there. But obviously, we're extremely biased. We built Renzo from the ground up. You're going to see ezETH literally everywhere. We were talking to the gear team the other day, and what we noticed is there's this massive 3-pool on Balancer. 3-pool allows users to swap between assets very easily with low liquidity, but we have a Balancer pool with Swell, EtherFi, and Renzo. And because of some of these protocol design decisions that we've made, the Renzo ezETH wrapped ETH balancer pool is one of the largest on Balancer. It's, I think, top 5. We have $55 million of TVL. That's community. That's like none of our mins go through the Renzo pool. So you'll see like ezETH swap for ezETH through to get wrapped ETH because the liquidity is already so good. And you're going to see that repeated in literally every single rollup. The last point that I want to make here, because I think I'm at time, is this L2 piece, the L1 and the L2 distributions that we're doing. We had it in our white paper back in June. And the amazing thing that's going on right now, we didn't think the demand was going to be there so early. So Renzo is only 2 months old. We're in a position to be able to secure a Chainlink price feed to be added as collateral on Compound. That's a little alpha for you guys. If you guys have been around in the space for a while, that usually takes sometimes years for protocols to be able to achieve. But there's so much demand already for LRTs in the first couple months that we're able to start these partnership announcements or relationships. The other piece that kind of came up when talking to the EigenLayer team was they also had a misalignment in incentives. So EigenLayer's clients are rollups. And the more rollups that use EigenLayer, the more value and the more yield they create. And without a protocol like Renzo that's able to actually align incentives with those rollups, what they started seeing is ETH leaving their ecosystems for mainnet to be able to get yield into EigenLayers. So we were asked to talk to a number of bridge partners. We ended up going with Connects, but what we haven't seen play out yet, and I know Cam's super excited because he's been killing himself over these integrations. Once we launch Arbitrum and BNB, we're actually completing an incentive cycle within EigenLayer. Because essentially what you're going to see happen is the rollups that are using EigenLayer and adding value, the TVL from them, not directly because we do have to bridge it, but that same TVL that's sitting on the rollups is actually securing those same services that they're paying for. So you have this really nice incentive loop within the incentive loop that we're trying to build at Renzo. So,
wait, could you say that again?
all right, so AVSs and EigenLayer, their main clients and users are rollups,
Yes.
right? So take Arbitrum, for example. If Arbitrum starts using EigenDA or Watchtowers or any other services, they're paying for those services and they're adding value, which means yield goes up. The TVL that's sitting on Arbitrum, the ETH, wants that yield opportunity. So they have to bridge back to mainnet, which means the TVL is actually again drained from that rollup. So by building this, and not everybody could do it because you need a protocol that's actually aligned on the incentive side. So what we're doing at Renzo is using Connects. We're taking in native ETH. We could take in LSTs as well, right? I talked about that. And although we're bridging that ETH or that LST into mainnet, you're getting a representation of that position, the LRT on the chain. So the TVL actually remains on the chain.
Okay,
So now users are getting access to the yield. The rollup is benefiting from lower costs by securing different EigenLayer services, and you have incentive alignment.
that makes sense.
Yep.
So basically you're like double counting the TVL for the chains, for the rollups.
No, because the ETH does get bridged, right? So they deposit the ETH, we do bridge it to mainnet, and we give them a token. So it's a debit and a credit. the ETH leaves the chain, but they get easy ETH back.
Yeah, depending on like how DeFi Llama is counting all these like
Well, DeFi Llama, if you look at some LRT protocols, they have an LST protocol and they have an LRT protocol that they're using the LST as a deposit for the LRT. And now you have two protocols that have $600 million of TVL.
But if you talk about the total ecosystem,
I mean, I often go, when was it, in like November, I was going at it with the DeFi Llama team because they were putting LRTs in the liquid staking category. I don't know if you guys remember that. And I kept telling them, I was like, guys, we need a new category. So they created infrastructure and stuck EigenLayer and us under EigenLayer. And then finally in January, they realized what was going on and you have a liquid restaking category on DeFi Llama. I'm going to pause there. That's quite a bit. Again, very different perspective. I didn't go into risk management. I mean, each of these things, like I was saying, Waichi and I were up to like 2 o'clock in the morning, like falling asleep on the couch talking about this stuff last night. But there's so many like things that you could go down, rabbit holes. But hopefully that gives you like a high level way to look at the LRT space, be able to make your own decisions as you're using protocols and understand what the differentiation between them actually is. Questions?
Like, does institutional operators need to do some collateral or like just not?
Do institutional node operators have to put up collateral?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. So the way we've done things at Renzo to be able to move fast is we try to simplify everything. No pun intended, we try to make it easy. So even the current agreements that we have with the node operators, they're commercial agreements. They're not based on on-chain dynamics. And the reason we did that is it's really hard to build out the mechanisms for fee sharing on-chain. It's difficult to build out a rocket pool-like model with operators, and we want to slowly introduce risk and be able to adjust to how the market is. So today, the terms and the agreements with the operators are commercial terms. Institutional grade operators also have insurance policies on slashing, which is very important. But over time, that is going to be one of the utilities of a Renzo token, where operators, as we decentralize the set, they will have to stake the Renzo Gov token so that if they don't follow what the DAO asks them to, as far as like securing AVSs, they could get slashed.
So there's an insurance term.
There's insurance on slashing on native restaking. So Mike talked about it. Node operators have two places in restaking. So if you've used Renzo and you deposit ETH, we take that ETH, it goes to like Figment or P2P, they stake it. We don't issue a receipt token. We think that's what an LST is. We think that's been played. It's actually inefficient. We auto compound that yield and then we restake it on EigenLayer. So you have that flow. But the restaking on EigenLayer, on mainnet, it's M1 contracts. It doesn't have the integration between operators and AVSs, so we're just spinning up eigenpods to essentially harvest points for the community. So, yeah.
Any more questions from the audience? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.